Hi friends, welcome to our channel Total QA. In our channel, we already posted a lot of videos in different playlists. If you can look out, Selenium WebDriver, Java, GitHub, REST API tutorial, CSS tutorial, XPath tutorial. In today's video, we're going to discuss how are we going to achieve data-driven framework using MySQL database. So, what are the prerequisites to achieve this? First thing, what is data-driven framework? Data-driven framework is mainly useful to maintain the data in a third-party resource file and use the data to execute the test cases in Selenium WebDriver. So when you say third-party resource file, it can be xlsx, xls, xml and even database as well. So as we decided to focus on database now, we are going to consider the database right now as MySQL to complete this activity. And if you look at, there are totally 4 automation frameworks, but we are focusing only on data-driven framework to achieve this functionality, because in the data-driven framework, the data is stored in the third-party resource file and data is not hard-coded in the test cases. What does it mean? Suppose if you write a function public void login and we write here driver.findElement By.xpath or id .sendKeys, we hard code the values here. Say, suppose for example Selenium as a username. Similarly, we try to hard code the value driver.findElement By.xpath .sendKeys, we provide some password. So the login method has 2 statements and these 2 statements are hard coded with these 2 values. So this cannot be reusable. Suppose if you want to convert this into a reusable method, it's a reusable method but we cannot parameterize the data, right? So this is a reusable method. Now we have to parameterize the data. In that case, we have to copy this method again, try to pass 2 different arguments. And these 2 arguments, we have to pass it here so that this logic is called multiple times with different sets of data, So how are we going to call this method? If you want to call this method, we call this method as login. Say here Selenium, say Selenium 123 as a password. So how do we maintain this data Selenium and Selenium 123? We are going to maintain the data in any of the formats. Right now we are maintaining this data in the MySQL. So to achieve this, we need MySQL as a database. So what is MySQL? We'll get some introduction about MySQL now. MySQL is mainly useful to store the data in tables where contains rows and columns. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, where we write queries to manipulate the data. And also we call MySQL as a relational database, and it is very important point, it is open source. Anyone can download and try to practice the queries for our exercises. And also as part of this topic also we are going to download MySQL. So first thing, we need to have MySQL as a prerequisite. So how are we going to download MySQL? What are the steps to be followed? the steps to be followed for downloading and installation of MySQL is provided in our blog. You can refer to our blog, which contains step-by-step information on installation of MySQL. So the link, I will provide this link also in the description of this video. Please navigate to this link and check step by step. You will see download link. Click on the download link. Follow the instructions. You can install successfully MySQL without any issues in your laptop. So I will provide this link here. Couple of points we have to discuss now before we go ahead and write a program to connect to the database. Okay, so the couple of points we have to discuss are MySQL runs on a specific port number. MySQL runs on a specific port number. So what is the port number it runs? You can check the plot and scroll down. While installation, you're going to give the port number. See here, the port number we had given here is 3306 is the port number we will give while installing MySQL. And also one more point, we have to give the password as root, username as root. Root. So don't change anything, just give all lowercase, don't give any uppercase here. So 3306 is the port number, username and password are root. So we came to know all the information because while installation we are going to select these values. And one more point to add, this MySQL is installed as a Windows service. So when it is installed as a Windows service, what we have to do to start or stop, we have to open services.msc, look out for MySQL because the service name is MySQL. Look out for MySQL service and try to open it. Click on start. It will launch MySQL server in our laptop. Once it is installed successfully, we have to start MySQL server by going into the services.msc and click on start for MySQL. This one, MySQL 57 is a service name. You have to identify this one, double click on it, you can start. And also you can do like this, stop, pause or restart here also. Okay. Now, so how do you start? Navigate to start or stop the server. How do we do it? Navigate to or open services.msc and click on MySQL 57. Okay. And in addition to that, as we are totally dependent on writing a program to connect to the database, especially in MySQL, we have to download some dependencies. What are the dependencies we need to achieve this connectivity to the database? The Maven dependencies we need are MySQL connector Java is required. Okay, so where are we downloading these dependencies? We can look out this information. MySQL connector. See here, Maven repository, it's already launched previously. So I can find out the information. MySQL connector, it is 8.0.21 is the latest version. Copy this, paste it here. So we got all the necessary information, the steps, the downloading steps, the port number, the username and password, how to start and stop the server, and also the Maven dependencies also we got to know how are we going to connect to the database. Now next step is getting into the program. So in achieve this functionality, I already created one Maven project. Okay, in this Maven project, I have created one com.abc.db connection.test. I created one package. I have already one Java program I created, login test, and also have written a method get db values. So we're going to write a logic to connect to the DB. Okay, and one more point to add. In addition to the server, right now we start and stop the server, and also to view, to connect to the server, and view the contents of the server, we have already an GUI which is provided by MySQL called Workbench. We are going to use to view the contents of the server. Workbench. So in addition to that, we also launching Workbench to read the contents of the server. Workbench. So if you look at here, totally, we are going to, once we install, we get this folder created. In this folder, in the start menu, programs MySQL, you can find MySQL Workbench. And also one more thing, that you can have the client also, command line client. So in the case of command line client, what we do mainly, we are going to open the command line and execute some queries. So what are the queries we can execute? You can find out the queries also provided in the blog. If you go to the blog and go to the bottom of the page, you will see here the steps, the queries, what we can execute from the command line. I will show few commands right now, but you can practice these commands. It's already available here. Let me open few. I opened MySQL command line client. I provide the password as root. So now I execute one command, show databases. So it has login database, MySQL database, testdb, information schema, performance schema. Suppose I wanted to find out the tables available in the testdb. Use testdb, select or show tables is a command we have to use to retrieve the tables. Show tables. And if you want to find out the information stored in a specific table, select star from dbt. It is empty. Select star from employee. It has 2 rows. So what is important to know here? The case of MySQL, we have a schema or a database. Okay, that is a testdb, and we have tables inside that, say employee and dpt. And in the table, say suppose if you pick employee, you have specific rows and columns. Suppose if you wanted to read the data stored in employees, you need that schema or the test or the database name. Here in our case it is testdb. So we are collecting all the information. If you look at here, we are collecting the port number, we are collecting the username and password, we are collecting the information how to start and stop, we are collecting the information how are we going to connect to the server, view the contents of the server, and what are the dependencies we need to download the server to connect to the database. And also, what is this representation in MySQL database? You have a schema or a database we call as testdb. In a DB, you have multiple tables. In a table, if you find out one table, you say select star, you get to know rows and columns. So all this information is important now before we go and write a program now. So let's try to copy this dependency now. Go to Eclipse. And here, open pom.xml file. Now, copy the dependency information, click on save, go to the package explorer. Now, the dependency is added already here. MySQL connector Java 8.0.21 is added already here, and it has a lot of packages. Okay, we can look into the packages after some time. Let's write the logic now. And also, as I said, Workbench is useful. Workbench is useful to connect to the database. So let me open the Workbench to view the contents of the database. It will take some time to launch. Meanwhile, we'll start writing the program. So before we start writing the program, we need to write down what is the class name we have to load. Especially if you look at in the case of MySQL, we need to load the driver class. The driver class is available in the com.mysql.cj. Okay, let me find out the class name, which one we have to use to load the driver. If you look at com.mysql.jdbc.driver, the driver class, this one we have to load. Okay, we have to load this class. Let's load this class now. Say class.forName. We are loading the class. What is the class we are loading? com.mysql.jdbc.driver is the class we are loading now. Now try to use try catch, quick fix, select, throws. Now we need to identify the information. What is the information we need to identify? When you say class.forNum, we are trying to load in the specific class, but we need to create a connection. If you want to create a connection, we have to use a class called connection class con equal to driver manager is responsible for creating a connection, but we have to call a method get connection. And there are different methods available which are overloaded, but right now we are using a method get connection which takes 3 parameters: string URL, string user, string password. When you say URL, it's a database URL of the form. It's a database URL of the form Jdbc colon subprotocol colon subname username password. So let's take three values. These are the 3 values we are going to pass for connecting to the DB. Database user, also the password. So get connection, we have to pass URL. So let's create a URL first, string URL. So how are we going to create a URL? Mainly we have to mention what is our JDBC connectivity. It is via MySQL. We are going to create a JDBC connection, Java database connectivity to MySQL, and we have to put colon. Here if you see JDBC, I have given JDBC. Then I have given subprotocol. The protocol is MySQL. Then subname user. So mainly this subname user is nothing but the URL we have to use to connect to the DB. The URL we use to connect to the DB is HTTP. Okay, we'll do one thing. Say localhost. Let's put localhost only. It is not required because we have installed here in our laptop only 3306/testdb. Okay, the URL is JDBC, which is nothing but JDBC they had already provided. Subprotocol name, we are giving subprotocol as MySQL, and also we are giving the URL to connect to the DB as localhost. 3306 is a port number /testdb. Now, what is the username? String username is equal to port. String Now again write down the steps. Driver manager dot get connection, and just put this. See, it automatically took these three parameters which we have declared and created one statement here. I'll just copy this and put it here. Username and password. Then we have to import for the connection. Mainly these classes are available in Java API, java.sql.connection. We have imported, and this might force the user to put try catch, because we are trying to create a connection. Whenever we try to create a connection, the connection might not able to complete, we get SQL exception. Okay, so now we are able to create a connection. Okay, now as I said, we are going to open a workbench now, right, to see the contents of the server. Okay, let's do that. Okay. Okay, so now the MySQL Workbench is launched now. Here we are going to create a new connection to connect to the server. Click on new connection. Now here we are going to provide localhost. Username is root. Password also root. Just try to provide the name as, say, DB connection. And click on test connection. It is asking for password. Just give root. Say password in lot. Click on OK. The connection is successfully made. Click on OK. Then you click on OK here. The connection is already created. When you double click here, it will connect to the DB and show the contents of the DB. Mainly, you have login DB, test DB. When you expand test DB, you have multiple tables here: department table, employee table. Okay, suppose if you are interested in a login table or database login table, we can even create a login table. Right click on the tables, create table. So here login, and try to give the column name as username. Here give the database varchar, it's for characters. Similarly, you can give the password here. We'll remove this as a primary key. Just select varchar. Well, let's copy this one and provide this here. And click on apply. You get the query is getting created, and also the table. This information you can even store and refer it whenever you require. Okay, apply. The table is created. Finish. Suppose we are interested to insert the data into login table. Right click, copy to clipboard, insert statement. Then Control V. Okay, so here we have to use username insert into testdb.login. Mainly login values, this is not required. You can say here, mainly you can provide the information here as, say, only the actual information. Say, suppose for example you are saying Selenium as username, comma Selenium 123 hash. Insert into testdb is the database name, login is the table name, values Selenium comma Selenium 123 hash. So now execute this, select this line of statement, click on this arrow to execute the selected portion of the script or everything. There is no selection. Click on this. It will try to execute successfully, and you can see the console. The information is stored here. Okay, now we are able to create a table and also insert the data into the table as well. Now move on to the program. So once we create a connection and also we are able to see the content of the database server via Workbench. Now let's write the program. So now we are going to use this con object in the line number 23 to execute the statements. Con dot create statement, which will give the statement here. Statement stmt. Now once we get the statement, we have to import the statement here. Then statement dot execute query. We're going to execute a query. Execute query. See here, there is string SQL. What we do here, we will try to put one statement. Say select star from testdb.login. Simple. That's it. And we are going to get result set. What is result set? It is nothing but the number of rows, the records which are available in the table. Okay, so that's nothing but result set. We import the result set, and also we can even find out the number of rows available. But if you want to know the number of rows which are available, there is a method called rs.getRow, which will give the number of rows. But what it is giving, it is not giving the number of rows, it is giving the retrieves the current row number. When you say current row number, what will happen? It will try to the pointer. We have to see in the case of result set, the pointer will be there at a particular position. The pointer where it is there, that row number will get. Get row will not get number of rows. So what we have to do, in order to achieve to get the number of rows, the pointer, we have to move the pointer of result set to the last row by calling rs.last. rs.last. What will happen if you call like this? The pointer will navigate to the end of the table. Then if you call get row, we get to know the number of rows available in the table. Int say rows. And if you want, you can print the number of rows here. Number of rows is rows. Why do we need to know the number of rows? Finally, the data that is retrieved from the database, we are going to store in an array. That is the reason, while before we create an array, we should know the size of the array, right? That's the reason, to get the size of the array, we are going to fetch the rows and columns now. First we fetch the number of rows, and similarly we have to fetch the columns. First let's execute this logic till now to find out if there are any issues, we can fix it. Okay, so we got an exception. Let's try to understand this exception. First thing, com.mysql Jdbc driver is deprecated. The new driver class is available. So it is always important, whenever there is a class which is deprecated, there is an alternate solution. Please try to copy this and use this in the import statement. Or here in the class name, we will try to use this to load this. Okay, this is the first point. Second point, operation not allowed for a result set of type result type set of type forward only. It means that it is, if you look at the step number, exactly which step it got failed, you can see it got failed in the rs.last. So it is not able to go to the last line. The pointer is not going to the last line here. So how do we overcome this error? In order to overcome this error, there is an alternative solution. We have to clearly mention the result set dot, we have to mention the type. What is the type of it? We will mention here type scroll insensitive, and also we will mention here result set dot, mainly we will mention here conquer read only. So we are mentioning that it's a So the scroll is insensitive, and also we are saying that we are going to read this database only. For reading purpose, we are going to the last row. So when we execute by adding these statements and click on execute now, okay, the resolution is helped us to get to the number of rows. So what is important to add? We have to add two things. Type. See here, type. The constant indicating the type of result set is scrollable. You can scroll up and down. And this one, it says that indicating that object may not be updated. So the concurrency mode, mainly the concurrency mode means mainly you are going to update it concurrently. The concurrency mode for result set may not be updated. So if you pass these two values, then we can successfully read the data stored in the database. The number of rows we got it. Next point, we need to get the number of columns. Do we have any method to get the number of columns here? Result set dot. So there is no method available to get the number of columns. I even tried say get COL, nothing is available. So what we have to do in that case, to achieve this, we have to use a new class called result set metadata, RSMD. Then you need to get the metadata using result set.metadata. If you get the metadata, it is easy to get the number of columns. Using result set metadata, we can get the number of columns. Right now, try to select, change to result set metadata and java.sql. Select this. Now, rsmd dot get column count. So, especially to fetch the number of columns, we need to use result set metadata. Otherwise, it's not required. Say number of columns. Okay. So we're able to fetch the number of rows, we're able to fetch the number of columns. Let's execute again. So number of rows 1, number of columns 2. Now once after that, we have to iterate the, okay, let's create an array now. It's important to create an array. Once we know the size of the array, we can create an array. It's rows and columns. The same principle we have to follow. The logic is same in XLS and xlsx also. When we read the data from the XLS or xlsx, we have to store the data in the array, two-dimensional array. We are also doing the same thing now. While rs.next, why result set dot next till the rows are available. What you can do here, we can say rs dot get string j plus 1. Get the first column, second column, third column, fourth column. But we have to iterate the columns. The columns are int j is equal to 0, j less than columns, j plus plus. What is j stands here? J stands here columns. rs.getString takes a column. Column index. rs.getString takes a column index. Okay. The first column is, what is the first column? 1. So, but the j is 0. But the j is 0. First column is 1. So, we have to say 0 plus 1 to fetch the first column value. Okay, so we have, say, suppose for example, you have columns, column 1, column 2, column 2, and you have row 1, you have row 2. Now result set is a pointer. Suppose result set is pointing here. So first the result set is pointing to the particular row, you iterate the columns. Result set is pointing to the row 2, you iterate the columns. So columns you need to iterate means you need a loop for a columns. But result set, if you want to go to the next row, rs.next, it will keep on pointer going to the next row till the rows are completed. So we have to iterate the columns, and column here stands for index, starts from index 1, here index 2. That's the reason J starts from 0. You can say 0 plus 1 refer to the first column in our logic. Okay, now we are able to achieve rs.getString J plus 1. We are able to achieve the value stored at a particular row and a particular column. We have to store in a data of 0i comma j, that is j, I comma j, the row index and column index. Right now we didn't create any value for row index. Say I is equal to 0. Once we complete the first row, go to the second row, just increment the I. When the I will be incremented, when the first row is completed, then before going to the second row, because this for loop will be executed for all the columns for the first row, then before going to the rs.next, just increment I plus plus, I will be 1. Then rs.next is pointing to the second row. Okay, so this logic will be executed successfully, and we can even print the contents of the database, data of I and j. Execute this statement. Now we are able to get the outcome successfully. Then now once we are able to, let's execute this logic now to get the outcome. Okay, so this is not even going inside to the while loop. Why? The reason being, here we are already saying rs.last. It is already pointing to the last row. We don't have any rows. So what we have to do, before we go ahead and try to retrieve the values from the table, rs.before first. If you do this, then the pointer will go back. The result set is a pointer. It will point it to the first row. Last is used to get the number of rows. Then after that, to fetch the rows, each and every row, you have to use rs.before first. Then let me execute this logic now. So we are able to get the data from the database. You can even check from the workbench. Okay, you can even right click, select rows, execute this, select this statement, click on execute. You get to know the data outcome, right? See, clear this. Okay, select star from the returns one row here. You see the data, right? Okay, you got the data here in the result grid. You have username and password. Result grid showing Selenium and Selenium 1, 2, 3. Now, let's move on. Once we get the array, the next step is this array we have to store in a data provider. Right? Usually what we do, in the case of Selenium, we always maintain the data in a data provider. Right? The data provider is used for the test cases. So we are doing the same thing now. We are going to store this in a data provider. And we will try to convert this test case as a method. And what this method does, this method returns a two-dimensional array. So return data. Your data is a two-dimensional array. You are going to return this. Okay. So we have written one reusable method. What this reusable method does, it will try to connect to the DB, get the data. Now, one thing what we can do is we have to store this in a data provider. Say public void, say feed data provider. We have to store the feed the data provider. For that we will call, mainly we will call this method, especially to get the data. Control C, put it here, and we are getting a 2-dimensional array as a outcome, and we have to return this data as an outcome of this method. And this data, what we are returning, we have to again store in a 2-dimensional array, and this data finally we are going to associate with this data provider. Say name is equal to DB. So you call the method. This method is returning a 2-dimensional array. This 2-dimensional array again we are storing in DB. Okay. So this reusable method we called here, and this is returning a 2-dimensional array. This we are again returning the data to store this data in the data provider. Finally, the data will be stored in the data provider. Once the data is stored in the data provider, it is very easy. We can associate the data provider name, data provider equal to DP, and we're going to say here public void login, validate login. And here we are going to quick fix. Then we can say try to get these DP values in 2 different columns. String uname, string password. Now we can say here driver, we can say system.out.println DB values. We can say what we fetch from the DB is name, similarly password. Then we can try to fill this data. How are we going to fill this data? We can say driver.findElement by.xpath and try to fill the data. Then we can achieve this functionality. So how are we going to do that? You can say WebDriver manager dot Chrome driver dot setup. So WebDriver is equal to new Chrome driver. We have to import the statements. I'll do that. Driver dot get URL. We are going to pass the URL here, and we are going to say driver dot find element by dot id dot sendKeys. We have to put here sendKeys as uname, not double quotes, the exact value. Similarly, you have to copy this, put this statement in the password, and click on login button. Okay, so this is how it will be achieved, and you can import the necessary statements. To import this driver manager Chrome driver.setup, we can refer to the separate video. There is a video already we have updated in our channel to try to install, to try to use WebDriver manager. Avoid using driver executable file. We are not even storing any executable file. We're just writing a statement WebDriver manager.chrome driver.setup. WebDriver driver is equal to new Chrome driver. That's it. It will help us to launch the browser. Then we enter the URL, we enter the text, we enter the password, we click on the button. So all these values you can write down to complete the functionality. But I'll just execute the logic now to see whether we are fetching the DB values via data provider to the Testng test case. And also we can see the test case is passed. See here, the data, the test case is passed, validate login, Selenium, comma Selenium 123 hash. This data is coming from database because these are all the DB values. In addition to that, there is one more point. If we are interested to insert the data, yes, we can even insert the data as well, but here we should not use execute query. If you want to insert the data, or if you want to insert the data or execute the insert query, so you have to just say xlsx rs equal to, I'll show you how do we insert the query. So here stmt dot execute update. Execute update, we have to provide the query here. So for execute update, we have to provide a query to insert the statement. So this is the data I'll take into consideration. Insert query, I'll put the insert query here, but here I'll put here as, say here, Java 123 hash. And this execute update is giving a integer. Okay, we can even print the value because this execute update is giving an integer. So what it is mean? Okay, let's scroll down and see what is the parameter mean. Either 1, so it returns either 1, the row count of the SQL data manipulation statement, or 2, SQL statement that return anything. So here 1 means you get the row count as the rows which are getting updated. If the rows are getting updated, we get 1. If the rows are not getting updated, we get the outcome as 2. Okay, we can even print the value here. Or not, we get to know the value plus here value. So what is happening here? We are even focusing on how to insert it, how to query that once we insert is done in this example. Now the test case will execute 2 times because we are inserting 2 rows of data. If you look at here, the test case is executed 2 times. Okay. So this example is really very helpful in real time. Suppose not only in the case of Selenium, if there is a database already available, if you want to validate and do database testing, especially this logic will be helpful where we are even inserting the data, we are even querying the data, we can execute any statement. In the case of execute update, you can even execute the update query as well. Okay, so statement dot, you can see the different methods which are available, and we are able to successfully execute this program and also execute the test cases via data provider. So this concept we call as data driven framework because the data is not hard coded, the data is retrieved from the third party resource file. Okay, so I hope this video is really very helpful for you. If you like my video, please